Oh, you gotta unmute, Paul.
Is that you muted? I was
Yeah.
unmuted.
Yeah. I know we forgot to get our
I've only been doing this for over a year, and mutes are still hard.
Yeah. We got to get this figured out. But yeah, welcome. Good to be back. Fresh new year.
2024.
I had to put this pen away before I throw it.
I gotta call out the amount of viewers right now. I think the amount is basically totaled what we saw even on recordings last year. So we're already off to a good start.
Yeah, it is heavy today. It's gonna be good. I'm excited.
Should be a banger.
We have
let's bring in the crew.
Yeah, let's just bring everybody up. All right, one at a time. Here we go. We got lots and lots of folks, lots and lots of buttons that can be pushed. All the cubes got really small. And I think we're hitting max bandwidth. We'll have to figure out a new way to handle this. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Should be really cool. Mm-hmm. All right. Oh yeah, we our legal team dropped this in here. Basically the whole expressions, viewpoints, opinions. We just didn't want a 2024 prediction from an individual becoming a thing, so they tossed that in here with the cool graphic with like birds facing each other. We thought that was appropriate. So anyway, our agenda's very short. I don't even think we put a next time in here, Paul. But big thing is this a circle.
Well, technically we do.
Oh,
wait,
that's right.
Did you add those in?
There is a teaser at the end. Yes.
I can't wait.
Let me triple check that. But yeah, man, we're all set on that. Yeah, we did. Yep. That's good. All right. So we probably should get started. We got a lot of people here.
Yeah, we want to just bring up.
Do we want to intros? Do you want to control?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking we just kill the slides first, so that everybody can see our faces. Since it's a little smaller.
Yes.
But can just round table everybody. Everybody can go kind of introduce yourself, say whatever you'd like, and then we'll get the ball rolling. Justin, you want to start us off?
Hey, Justin Elzy, Hacking Elzy on Twitter, CTO at Trusted Sec, and do red team stuff.
Sorry, was that my turn? Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Sorry. Hi, my name is Aton Rutsky. Anton loves D&B on Twitter. I'm a threat research team lead at Sumo Logic. I love anything blue team, purple team, IR, logs, queries, all that good stuff. Really happy to be here with this crazy talented group. So thanks for having me.
Right on. Andrew, want to kick us off?
Andrew Schwartz. I'm currently the practice lead of the purple team at Trusted Sec. I work with Justin Elzy very closely, as well as a lot of other people in the industry. Very happy, again, to be here. Just love sharing information, putting content out there. Anything purple team, DFIR, offensive as well.
Awesome.
All right.
Nas.
Yeah, my name is Nasreddine and Nasbench on Twitter. Threat researcher, detection engineer at Nextron System. And yeah, I love Sigma, by the way. And that's all.
Last but not least, the legend himself.
Oh, jeez. Hey, yeah, my name's Jonny. I'm not going to say my Twitter handle on the stream, but I do a lot of threat research, Windows research specifically, a lot of reverse engineering malware, telemetry generation identification, and adversary capability identification. So that's kind of my thing.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Bring back in the slides.
There's all the Twitter handles in there.
I made my Twitter handle when I was in college, but I'm like too far deep to change it now. But I just want everybody to know I do hate the handle. 100%.
But it's cool.
You've really committed because everything has it. Your blog, GitHub, like you really just stuck with it. So.
I'm too far deep now. It's like I can't change it.
I mean, tech startup's all about rebranding and pivoting. There's plenty of time and opportunity now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, J Security 500.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
501.
501. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Oh yeah, we have a Twitter account which viewers or followership is growing. My name's Michael Haig, and he's below.
Paul is. Yeah, I'm Paul. Yeah.
We're kind of
over
like
a year, still don't know how to do introductions, but that's fine.
That's fine. It gets better.
Show up for the hot takes anyway. You don't really care who we are. You just want the hot takes, to be real.
700 episodes later, and you still can't introduce yourself. Nice.
Yes. And then so I mean, our big thing for this episode was looking at 2024 predictions, and so we wanted to kind of remind everybody how exciting 2023 was. I love how we left a comment after triangulation because there's so much happening. But
I feel like there was more there, and then that list just got way too long, so we're trying to cut it back into some of the interesting things that kind of occurred. So you started with the breaches and obviously the wars, and I was like, oh, what about some vulnerabilities that came out? And so I was like, well, what did happen last year? And about 4 of these I legitimately forgot, even though I had responded to incidents regarding them. And I was like, oh, I forgot about those. And I think there's a good reason we forgot about them.
Yeah, I forgot about that one war.
Citrix, Confluence, those 2, even though I
forgot.
did some big things with those.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have a favorite?
Yeah. Is this ringing a bell for anybody?
I mean, the move it stuff has been a natural progression, right? Like it's popping stuff on the edge and stealing a bunch of files is significantly easier than trying to ransom a whole environment. So I think that's using 0 day on that side's a interesting progression, just because everybody's been workstation side of things. That's just kind of the natural evolution to more mature companies actually doing things right. Hopefully.
I think that's an interesting tie-in that we'll talk about later, which is you have organizations that have like cloud hosting, so like your OneDrive, your SharePoints, Google Drive, but then you have organizations that are still hosting on-premise, but also hosting the same application but in the cloud. So it'll be interesting as we go into that section talking about cloud and on-premise and hybrid connectivity. This is a really interesting point.
Yeah, the climate seems very hot. I mean, even coming into 2024, we're looking at breaches that are just being disclosed late. And obviously with the triangulation thing coming in from long-term campaign and just so many things going on. And a lot of these are still actively being exploited and happening still, which is fun. Always fun. But
let's jump into the good stuff. The reason why everybody's here.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Did you hit the end? Oh.
Remember what the first one is. Oh, yeah.
There you go. Our intern was on point for graphics this time, so everybody gets some sweet stuff out of that. Huh?
There are so many other ones that we should have included, but we just picked the cream of the crop on this one. But there were some really good ones.
I like the bird in the mountains.
Yeah.
I do. I don't know what you typed in to get that prompt going, but all right.
I don't know.
2024 predictions. Let's hit the first one. The state
Let's
of
do it.
testing. So this will be good for a lot of us. What do we see different this year? What do we see, especially from like kind of evolving from things of the pen testing side to red teaming and even purple teaming? Obviously, we have a lot of people that are fitting into all of these categories. So, Justin, what are your predictions for the state of testing this year? Kick us off.
So I think you're going to see more assume breach. I think a lot of the clients that do, large red teams are starting to realize that, it's cool to spend weeks doing phishing, getting access, things like that. I think you're going to see a shift towards that and more collaborative, like red teaming. Obviously people, everybody talks about purple teaming, and usually when we talk about it, that's adding net new detections and things like that. But I think there's a big need for companies to have even just like the red team piece step in and work with their blue team, even if the consulting company doesn't do like any defensive, validation, adding new detections, things like that. I think companies are starting to say, hey, like we're really concerned about this specific area. What if our Citrix server gets popped? We'll put you there, go do stuff for like a short time period, week and a half, then talk to the blue team and we'll work back on it. I think you're seeing more of like those micro assessments, which that's still a pretty long time. But when I talk about red teaming, a lot of those are 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks with bigger goals. I think you're going to see more of a focus on, niche areas of concern. You saw that a lot after last year with like MGM. People were calling nonstop, hey, can you call up the help desk and try to reset a password? That used to be big 10 years ago. People forgot about it. Somebody weaponized it again. Here we are. So I think as events happen, you see people go from the news to wanting it tested a lot quicker now.
Great perspective. Let's flip it to the purple side. Going from red, and you kind of led into purple. So Andrew, I think you're a good one to start with this. Seeing from what you saw last year and kind of heading towards the end of it, like how do you see purple teaming or testing in general evolve this year?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Generally with, purple team traditionally, we may have been a little ad hoc-ish, or we may have pulled from the penetration test report or the red team report to close those deltas or gaps. And then, also looking at maybe a core 30 from open source intelligence or even internal intelligence. I think what is really happening now, or we might see, is a little bit more first of inquiry-based testing of question, ask, and question, answer, and where we're looking to see what do you really want to try to protect, what are you trying to is really being targeted, what are you really concerned about keeping you up awake, and using those more as drivers to then drive the purple team saying, okay, we now to focus on cloud, but what within the cloud? Maybe some random SQL blob that's backing up all the keys to the kingdom that people don't know about, right? So doing a little bit more of the inquiry-based testing to workshop it out and threat model, so to speak, to then drive the purple team a little bit more effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, that's some really interesting points. Is there anything specific that you kind of seen a trend over? I know Justin kind of touched on like the social engineering side, especially on the help desk. Anything specific you saw, especially towards like the last quarter?
Yeah, so I think it's still in people, like the DFIR report, and all of the big, end of year breach reports are still a wealth of information. And you're seeing a lot of the stuff just saying, how is this working and why is it working? Or do they not have, top EDRs? They not have top controls, and why is that? And the answer, really trying to get to that core crux. Is it a lack of telemetry? Is it just a lack of content? So you're seeing, just going back to that DFI report of 2023, you're seeing, our clone coming in there, or still PS exec. Why PS exec after all these years? And hopefully we'll maybe flush this out is, does that really mirror what red teams are doing? when you have a lot of these smash and grab actors still, using the tricks of the trade, so to speak, of what they know it works. They know it does work effectively. But, you do, what LZ did on Twitter, which is actually great. You take all these attacks and you run them just out of the box against EDR, and you see that they will stop. And I think going a little bit more into that, is still imperative to do. A lot of organizations don't have that. So I think it's a combination of both. And hopefully that I'm really hoping that a lot of that gap gets closed, and we're making it very, very harder for the adversary we're raising the bar for the adversary.
Right on. Great points. And I think we'll touch more on the out-of-box testing against EDR a little bit later, but kind of feeds into Jonny. You did a webinar recently with Andrew, actually, and you made a spicy take that red teams don't provide as much value as purple teams. And I'm also curious if Andrew also agrees in that aspect.
So let me explain why I say that. So the reason being is, I would say when I look at red teams today, just like with my consulting kind of career and et cetera, seeing how people perform red teams, I don't see a lot of valued feedback sent back to blue teams. It's more, we did this attack, here's this report, good luck, have fun, go do what you can. There is no, hey, have a suggestion. Like I've seen red team reports that say like disable NTLM, for example. Like how many domains today can really go do that? So like the suggestions in red team reports are not practical, I would say, in a lot of environments. And I think it's just because it's more of, let's do the test and kind of move forward, where I think purple team and a lot of instances are more of, I don't want to use the word handholdy, but more educational in the sense of, hey, we're going to run this attack. Here are the various different techniques and variations that you can perform. And then, you want to go look at like telemetry or detection capability. Let's go take and talk about that, right? I also see within red teams, this is going to be a spicy take. LZ, don't come at me quite yet. We just started. But there is a lot of quote unquote hiding like the secret sauce behind techniques and TTPs. Like, and I think inside of a lot of reports, when someone's like, hey, I did like WMI lateral movement, it's okay. Like how exactly did you do that? What's the technical nuance behind that? So like I can go and maybe, go look for a defensive or detection capability that's along with that. So that's the reason why I say I think purple team is trending on the side of more valuable inside of red teams. Obviously, I think red teams have value. I'm not saying they don't, but it's a very interesting place that we're in terms of like every like team out there is a sub team of the SOC, right? Like you're supposed to feed into the SOC some way, shape, or form. You're supposed to enhance detection or prevention capability, right? That's the reason why we're in this. We're in cybersecurity, right? So like, if your team is not doing that, you as in like general you community you, if your team is not doing that, are you actually making a change and are you actually doing your job properly? Like that's the kind of question that I often find myself asking when it comes to red teaming and pen testing.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't think it's a hot take, by the way. I think it's very legitimate. Huh? Go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think what happened is that red teaming became popular because lots of companies had pen tests. You had an EDR product. Your pen test lights up an EDR. Red teaming by design isn't for everyone. Like it isn't for the level, the number of people that are buying them today. It wasn't designed for that, right? Like I think people are selling a lot of those to immature clients who can't digest a report. I can't speak for all red teams, but I know ours and most other ones are fairly happy to share TTPs and explain things. Like on a number of them that we do, we definitely spend the last week working with blue teams explaining how and why, what we did, replaying attacks, like things like that for clients if they want it. So I just think a lot of the bad stories that come out of red teams are usually poorly scoped and clients that aren't mature because companies don't want to say no and lose a sale. I think that you should definitely be doing purple teaming before red teaming, right? Like you're attacking companies that are defenseless is, great, you won, but nobody actually wins. The only caveat, and I've seen work, is where a new CISO comes in, they're trying to get a budget and level set, they have an external red team done, shows a bunch of deficiencies, and they kind of use that to build a plan. But the plan from there isn't to do more red teaming, more offense. It's to do a bunch of defensive steps in between. So I don't disagree with any of the points you made. I think that it's just a lot of that comes from situations that people put themselves into where they might not be ready for what's happening.
Yep. One thing I think red teams are super helpful for that I don't think is talked about enough is the reaction time of your defensive team. Like, I think that's one of the things that is never really touched upon. But if we want to talk about evasion capabilities, there is an evasion capability by which the adversary is moving quicker than your defensive operations team is moving. And in the sense of like being able to get in and get out of the environment quicker. And so I think that's a very big value that red team does have. And I also say with red teams too, one thing I see, I reverse a lot of malware that I see. And I would say it seems like the red teams that are done out there, they're more of the quote unquote, like new cool attacks and techniques that are out there and not maybe great representatives of what's in malware. Now, a lot of the malware that I see, like, let's be frank, like, you know, I was talking to Paul about one the other day. Some of it's not written well. Some of it's actually not going to work after you reverse it. Like, it's like some of the malware authors they're not the greatest. But what I mean by that is I think sometimes we set the bar too high of what adversaries are going to do. And red teams are more like, I guess it should be focused on what someone can do instead of what adversaries are doing today.
I'll throw this last counterpoint and let somebody else go. I think the problem we run into is that, so you watch like OA Lab, you talk to a lot of people who reverse malware all day. The red team stuff stands out, techniques, things that aren't normal. But the problem is that if you actually try to get public style malware samples running on some of the environments that we red team, the amount of effort you would have into doing that and ongoing just to get an initial callback. Like, here's a good example. Go get Cobalt Strike running on CrowdStrike with Overwatch or some other similar product. How much effort are you going to have? And clients don't, the test isn't, can I get something running? It's usually everything that happens post-exploitation. So you run into a really big problem of, do I spend $1 million trying to get Cobalt Strike to work versus do I go with what's going to be effective? So it puts red teams in a really weird spot because we run into clients where they'll give reviews and say, hey, we had a previous vendor in here, they couldn't even get code running, they were horrible, and then they run around and saying that. So I think there's a weird perspective, a weird place to live in with client expectations as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah,
I also think part of that, Justin, is like in some chance luck. Right, because we all know organizations don't have either A, full deployment, or B, when it is fully deployed, there's so many different policies with so many different caveats that are just deviated from the baseline, right? They're either tuned down due to, like, at servers, but especially because of the potential risk, they don't want to try and potentially break something. And so I think sometimes when you do get those instances, it's like a little bit of luck in that case, especially on like the initial access, but then going in there. But if you had, like, let's say like the default baseline, which we'll touch on again at the end, which is the MITRE evals, like where you can kind of see like what should the MITRE evals potentially look like and why I think the current state of them isn't effective for anybody in any capacity because it's so much variance. But I think it's an interesting point.
People would love to not spend money on R&D, right? Like, I have an R&D team. Like, we're a consulting company. It's a cost. If we could be effective and just buy Cobalt Strike and give people value, like, everybody be happy here to say, hey, we saved a bunch of money. But that's why it's so funny to watch like what's going on. You read the DFIR report and you're like, oh man, they're out here using this. And then you go to these clients and you're like, I can run all of this and they're going to rage on me. And then you're like, well, we have to spend money to be effective. So it's like there's the disparities from the haves, have-nots, and what works is so wide right now that like, depending on where you sit, the lens is wildly different on what is effective.
Awesome. I think this is a great section. I think we should kick to the next one because I think we have a lot of cool stuff to potentially talk about. Mike, you can kick us off with a cloudy chance of on-prem.
Yeah, exactly that. I think, Justin, you've made a couple tweets about it, or there's been tweets about it and conversations just about all these edge breaches and everything going on. Our organization's pulling back. I don't know who wants to take the first swag at your prediction. What will organizations do with on-prem or cloud?
I would say only one thing is that it's going to be like, how do you say? They're going to live together. People,
Yeah.
I used to work at a previous firm who believes firmly in on-prem and will never buy cloud. I mean, never. So, but like the cloud aspect is very, it makes it easy. It offers certain stuff, certain requirements that are hard to achieve nowadays. Like if you try to do security on-prem and you have an actual like an architecture and you try to implement some stuff, it's actually practically impossible if you don't have the correct team. So it makes sense to move on to the cloud, but moving to the cloud like shifts. It's similar to the MDR aspect. Like when you think you have an MDR, you think it's a done deal, but most of the MDR can't help you mitigate everything. Sometimes they help you like get started or like ping you, say, hey, you're in danger, be careful. But if you don't have the rest of the story, it doesn't make sense. So would it be, people are now, maybe I would say the hype of the cloud will be evaluated equally with the on-prem, I would say. Like previously the solution would say, okay, I hate myself, I cannot hire engineers or I cannot do that. So let's go to the cloud and it will solve certain aspects. But now we're seeing all the like openness or the vulnerability aspect that people are getting attacked on. Now people will start to think, and the equation will change a little bit in favor of the on-prem. Now it has more aspect. Okay, you can control certain stuff. You'll still have your privacy. If someone gets, I don't know, breached, not everyone gets breached. You get breached, so you need to be targeted instead of like people targeting Microsoft, and you'll be screwed over with the rest. So those kind of things. I would say it will be in favor a little bit of the on-prem because now we have proof actually, because a lot of people built this idea of the cloud on certain concepts that are theoretical, that do not exist in real life, like super secure, super blah, 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 easy to manage. Yeah, in theory, similar to on-prem. Like every suggestion on Active Directory cannot be implemented. Like similar to it's very similar to when you go to a Microsoft answer forum, and the first answer is always run SFC. Like
Yes. Yes. From a testing perspective, I'm curious, are we going to see more red teaming, or are organizations doing that now, or is it just kind of starting to ramp up for like cloud attacks for an organization or cloud testing? How is that looking? I don't know who to pick. There's too many testers. Paul, you're good at calling. Go ahead, Justin.
I'll go quick. So we built a cloud team a couple years ago because we saw that shift. I don't think people still realize you can do cloud pen testing. I think we talk to people all the time. They're like, "Oh, we do red teaming, whatever." Like, can you test the cloud? We're like, "Yeah, we have a whole team. We have Edwin, a bunch of people to write blogs about it and do a bunch of great things." I think it's just people, and the other mistake that I've seen happen is, so you do vulnerability scans, you do pen testing, you do red teaming, purple team, all this great stuff. You're now in the cloud and they're like, we want to red team the cloud. And we're like, have you considered doing like CIS benchmark and the basics? And people are like, no, we know that like, that's not important. We're like, well, actually you're starting over. So maybe you should do the basics. And my on-prem versus the cloud thing from a completely non-security point of view is it's a lot more expensive than people think. And now it's starting to show that it's more expensive, right? It used to be, we're going to shift everything over here and save money, and we're going to have less headcount, we're going to do all these things. And like the year over year costs are just going up. So people are starting to like, I think, back off on plans, at least from what I've got. Like Azure AD makes a lot of sense from like an IAM perspective, but like the whole lift and shift doesn't work. It wasn't designed to do that. Like people are like, we're just going to move all of our VMs to EC2 instances. Like, yeah, you might want to run the math. And I think that that's starting to happen, more and more, especially like inflation stuff the last year. People are way more cognizant of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm curious from like Anton's perspective, and even you, Mike, working in two sim organizations, are you seeing a focus and a shift in, we did a lot of effort over the years on endpoints, right? That's based on the different telemetry collection of endpoints. Are you seeing a shift into the more of the cloud and SaaS logs to build out the detections as organizations scale up? Like, is that still trending upwards from last year to this year?
Yeah, I'll run first. I've noticed in different like public Slack channels. I've noticed there's been a large uptick after Microsoft's breach, the key one, that there's been a large uptick for folks looking at identity, 365, all those kind of logs. And, you know, and I even post that breach, right? Everybody wanted the, that one particular log that they forced Microsoft to finally give people.
Mail
Yeah,
items
we're talking-
accessed.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So I've definitely seen an uptick in that. So there's definitely more chatter. Mauricio actually published a blog. It published yesterday, all about 365 and everything like that, Azure detections. But yeah, I definitely think it's more the major focus. You know, I've been telling the team. I think we've been talking about it since Jose was here the first time about, you know, we need to focus on cloud and identity and everything like that. But things kind of keep switching back to endpoint network, but cloud's definitely the place.
Yeah,
Anton?
I definitely agree. Yeah. Totally agree. The cloud is definitely a focus for us and our team, and getting like good content out there for cloud data sources. But I think the kind of like distinction between on-prem and cloud isn't as like neat and binary as we would probably like to think, because even if you're running like a cloud native company, you still have endpoints that access the cloud, right? So there's still something like quasi on-premise available there. And even if you're running fully like cloud workloads, the VMs that are in the cloud are still potentially Windows, right? And potentially even an Active Directory domain just up in the cloud. So I think like we can't really jettison all the awesome like detection content that we've built for things like PSExec and WMyExec and all that good stuff that we've run on-prem, and just kind of like discount that for the cloud. But there definitely is a focus on the cloud. But something that has been top of mind for me, interesting, is like where those two aspects connect. Like, how do you get from on-prem to the cloud, or from the cloud back to on-prem? I think that's like the really interesting like research fodder, or at least for me personally. And I think that's like building detections from that, especially from a vendor standpoint, is difficult. But that's a challenge that we're working on. That's kind of exciting, because it involves like crunching a lot of data, like normalizing the data, getting like rules that actually tell you, hey, something's going on, and are actually like tell you that something's happening and explain it to you very like in a clear fashion. Because I think if we keep thinking in this way, that like cloud and on-prem are completely two separate things, I think we're gonna run into a wall eventually. Because even organizations that back in my consulting days, I would ask like, hey, do you have an Azure presence? And then they would say, no, we don't. But then they use Office 365, so they do, right? And that was kind of like tucked away in the back corner, like, no, we're not really cloud. But even if you're using like productivity, like Teams, like SharePoint, things like that, Office 365, you're still in the cloud, whether you think you are or you're not. So definitely interesting, an interesting dynamic for sure.
Yeah, it's a super great perspective. And to kind of coincide with that, which you touched on, was like the consulting side. Like, Andrew, from your perspective, are you seeing kind of like more of the purple teaming in the cloud? I know Justin kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, what's your perspective on that side of things?
Yeah, we definitely are. We're seeing more, AWS testing, and definitely when we go to leverage, the cloud team. Patrick Mayo is phenomenal with our AWS, and then we go to Edwin if it's Azure specific. But we're seeing that it's just, hey, we want all these detections in the cloud. Why can't I just copy and paste from one to the other? And it doesn't work that way. The logs are different. There's a variety of different logs, right? The unified sign-in logs, the audit logs. You have the Graph API now coming out. It's a different lift, and the attacks are completely different. Right? You have like that Teams Fisher that was great, is dropping malware through Teams, or, team filtration by Melvin. I mean, there's just a lot of different attack surface, and it's not always one-to-one. Even the Kerberos is just completely different in terms of what you're looking at, in the cloud. So it's definitely more collaborative that we're looking to do, and definitely try to bring in that level of knowledge to close the gap on the blue team side, of to have someone from the red team side and really collaborate with.
Great perspectives. And this is kind of like a question for anybody, which is, are you seeing, whether it's for detections or for testing, on more of the SaaS side of things? So like, hey, if you get access to Okta, can I detect some insider threat in the Salesforce or some other like SaaS product, and how are customers like approaching that or asking questions about that?
I can take that. I mean, a little bit. So we're definitely, and that's going back to a little bit more of the threat modeling, right? Of you have to ask and answer in the scope. When you're doing these purple teams of saying, okay, what do you have? Where is it? What are you trying to protect? Just the bare basic questions. We're trying to protect Salesforce. Okay, how does that operate? Who has the right level of access? Going to the IAM and the PIM and the controls around that, but as well as what level of telemetry do you have, and just how does it operate? So again, we found, one client was backing up their Salesforce into Azure. They're all Azure based, and they didn't have any telemetry around that backup blob. So now what does that look like of, if I get into Salesforce, do I really need to, or can I just go back to that where all that data is, where that data is, and can I compromise that blob and pull out that data and do whatever I need to do, delete it, post it on Pastebin or whatnot? And what does that telemetry look like? So you're seeing kind of the both elements, if that kind of makes sense, right? The Salesforce, but also where is it going and who's accessing it? And then what's being done once it's shipped further on. And that's why I kind of have a prediction that there's going to be a little bit more of these third party, if that's the right term, breaches. Like I go through Okta and then I pivot into or Salesforce or some other, data piece or whatever. And then I go into the, the cloud or the on-prem or whatnot. A lot of those style attacks. And I think you had them on your list.
Yeah, I would just toss out that the IDPs that are cloud-based have decent logging, decent controls, but as soon as you get away from things that are doing authorization like Salesforce and all the rest of those, ServiceNow, all that stuff, it definitely gets way more Wild West between, company to company. Like if you say, hey, our IDP is X, you're going to put some logs and controls around it, maybe impossible travel, stuff like that. As soon as you get away from like IDP because it's security, it's definitely all over the board, and I would say got a long way to go.
Yeah, those are great perspectives, and I think a key point which was touched on, which was we can't treat them as two separate entities anymore. We have to understand the connectivity, especially everybody's like, oh, everything's going cloud, endpoint's dead, right? Just like PowerShell's been dead for a decade now. But now it's still there. It's still kicking around. And really understanding like how to homogenize, which I don't think has really come true yet, of like what that looks like, right? Endpoint occurs, session theft, then it's in the cloud, and then back onto potentially on premise after you go up and in or in and out, depending on how you want to look or how you start. So I think it's going to be interesting, especially how we see the shift. And I think the key point is that we all touched on the log structure. They're all different. Even look at Microsoft's logs. They have a common schema, and there's like 10 event fields that are the same and everything, but then they just jam everything else that's relevant into like extended properties, modified properties. Anything that's useful is just all jammed in there and then not cohesive at all, which makes it really difficult for, I'm sure, like the Splunks, the Sumo Logic, even, the XIS at Cortex are looking at the data and going, what do we do with all this, and where does it all live, and how do we structure it? So I think it's going to be an interesting thing that is going to potentially be more of a challenge this year as we kind of see that hybrid connectivity just continue to scale. I don't think it's going to shift back more on-prem or more into the cloud. I just think it's going to continue to grow of hybrid, and each org has their own variants of what it looks like.
I would disagree with that. I wouldn't say it would continue to grow, because I think the point that you missed out is that many people cannot defend against those types of attacks. But the moment that it goes outside of your premise, it's a done deal. You're getting breached by something you don't even consider. And that's a very dangerous situation. When you try to evaluate your threat model, you say, okay, I did that because I wanted this feature. I wanted this provider to handle this identity thingy for me, but is it the correct stance? I did it because it was blah, blah, blah. It was interesting. It was famous. It was whatever. But now just imagine you're sitting in your network and boom, you're breached because somebody leaked whatever and he can control that, and he can grab your token and access your company without you even knowing. So how do you protect it? It doesn't really matter about logging, because even if you detect it, what can you do about it? You really think that people detecting it will really impact whatever happened? Most of the things that we see are after breach, not before breach. Most of the detection are after the fact, people looking at the logs and designing a report. It's not a report of somebody at the same moment. It's very rare when you see those. So it's a shift in perspective, because just imagine when you took the decision to move things outside of your organizations, you had a perspective that it's safe. Now it's proven that it's not. And it's not only not, it's very dangerous. You can get pwned or owned immediately. And that's, I think if I was doing that sort of thing, I would evaluate that 100% more, especially with the recent stuff, I would say.
Yeah, great perspective. I think there was that kind of marketing of, you move to the cloud, somebody else is going to manage it for you, it's secure, it's safe, but then you realize you're still responsible for configuration. And I think the changes in the default configs over time have gotten better, but it's very easy to make that one wrong checkbox, and now it's basically useless and everything's wide open, right? Especially talking about like conditional access policies, like great example, or something else, right? There's variants of that. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I think it'll continue to be a problem, but just like anything, we'll just keep hacking away at it until one day we maybe solve it. Do we ever solve it? I don't think we ever really solve anything. I just think we make things a little bit better.
I will say for all their faults, though, if you want to call them faults, you have to give a little bit of credit where credit is due on the Microsoft side and the Azure side, being one real quick of they're locking down a lot of, the legacy authentication, legacy protocols. They're turning that off. They open up the graph API log. I mean, was it the full floodgates? No, but it's still something. I mean, they are doing that. They're putting a number matching on everyone. I mean, they are making some. I mean, it's a small wins, but in small movement, but they are making movement, right? And even on the on-prem side, I know Steve is working hard to really kill NTLM. Ned has argued for years to kill SMB1, and they're really making that headway and to say, hey, let's go more into the Kerberos side. So they are doing it, for all the faults that are uncovered. But there is credit where credit is due with a lot of these wins on the control side. And that's very important because you do have to test the effectivity of these controls sometimes, and deterrence controls and we'll see what fails, and what succeeds.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think it's really easy for anybody who is not doing development or engineering of telemetry and capability to say, why doesn't Microsoft give me X, Y, or Z? Right? What we have to remember is the majority of people that are developing, they don't always have like security in mind. And so I have to give kudos to Microsoft because it's been seen over and over again. It might not be as quick as the vast majority of our community would like, but I would argue to anybody who says like it's not quick enough, okay, go develop it and let me know how that goes for you, okay? And see if you can come up with like a production version of that, because Microsoft has to also do that for the wide masses, but they also have to make sure they support, people who are in like the old school technology. And that's a really tough spot to be in. I'd love to go to somebody and say, turn off your Windows 7 box. But, they're like, well, if I turn off this Windows 7 box, everything else crashes. And it's like, well, what can you do? It's one of those things that we can start to do, like not only like detection layering, but prevention layering as well, kind of minimize the attack surface as much as we possibly can. But, I agree with what Andrew said. I'm a big proponent for giving kudos, looking at the cup half full versus empty, I would say.
Yeah, I think there's kind of three big things that I'm really excited to see, which is, we already touched on two of them, which is the NTLM, the SMB, but then if anybody saw, there was a massive thread and blog post from Microsoft about print spoolers and how they're doing some upgrades to the security on that.
Drivers.
So yeah, drivers. Well, they've been improving drivers.
I thought you were going to say passkeys.
What's a driver? What's a lull driver?
I'm sad. I think passkeys and authenticator, I think, is going to be the biggest game-changing thing Microsoft does this year. But we'll see. Then you got to worry about people's phones getting hacked and restored is going to be a new thing. But I think that the passkeys and making that accessible to the masses via an app is going to be the biggest thing they do to get rid of passwords.
So I can connect my phone to open Wi-Fi, is what you're saying, and be okay?
Sure can.
Okay.
Download whatever app you want. Totally safe and secure. It's fine.
They're free.
For free. Some of them will even pay you. All right. Good discussion. So now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff that I think 2024 is going to bring. New year, new evals, MITRE tests. It seems like we just wrapped those up last year, but let's start to ramp up this year. How many vendors are going to win this year, and how many will achieve over the 100% MITRE coverage for the tests? Because we all know that has happened previously. Even if they don't admit it, they definitely are telling themselves we detected even more than they thought.
They're all in the magic quadrant.
Yeah, the winners get to go into the top corner of the magic quadrant as well. Forrester's going to do some like A+ reporting for them too. Like it's a whole Stanley Cup event for this at this point.
They have enough buy-in now where they could ratchet it up. Like if you made this thing an impossible task initially, and you're like, hey, you might look bad, nobody would do it. Now everybody's so doubled down, you just got to like be like, we're going to throw a bunch of randomness at you and see how it goes. We're going to do the same randomness to everybody. I think you're at a point now where it's such like an industry standard thing that you could start making it a little bit trickier for people. But we'll see.
I was trying to Google what it is this year. I couldn't find anything.
Oh, I don't think they tell you until after.
Yeah,
like
until you get your do-over.
Yeah. Your 17 config changes, right?
Yes.
I think a third party actually needs to be involved in like either the validation and the deployment and setup of it versus leaving it between MITRE and the vendor, right? Because each has their own purpose and what their objective is for that, and there's specific rules and things that have to occur. But I think an unbiased third party should be involved in like the validation, configuration, and also just the arguing of like, well, that's actually not true, or that is partially true, right? Like I truly think that something is that, and I think there needs to be exposing of like the configuration, right? Like it's pure default. Whatever agent it is, it's the default config that if you are a customer and you bought that agent and you deployed it out, like it's default, turn off the prevention, right? I get it. If you just run the prevention, maybe it should be both, right? If you run it first with everything default, prevention and detection, let it go. All of a sudden, everything you ran, all the tests and everything's blocked and you can't get execution, whatever, then you turn it to report only, but base default report only. That way you can have a true test of what the agent capability is without turning it up or turning it down so that you get those things that is to the point which touched on earlier. Go get a basic Cobalt Strike beacon running on a default install of something. I think that way it gives a more modest and unbiased approach to what is the actual capability of these agents, because I think it gets skewed with all of this back and forth and what actually occurs behind the scenes. I think MITRE should open up what the rules and regulations are for when the tests occur as well. I think that helps.
I'd love to see
open it.
Old, current, and like future. So like use techniques from the past year, use what's happening now, and then this may or may not be done, but take like some red team implement that works, that they know works. Because to Naz's point before, you care about post exploitation. So let's run something they can't fully detect, aren't going to have eyes on. Let's unhook the process in a red teamy way. Because the thing is sometimes the stuff that red teams are doing happens in a year from now for various reasons that we might discuss later. But like that would be a great test, because I'm sure you can detect a year ago what's happening today, and then the future, just to kind of give people some. And I know that's tricky, but that was what I would like to see, because you know a lot of these companies work in technology that you don't really hear about unless you're trying to reverse EDR and get things to work. So just a little bit different view.
I would agree with that. I think the big thing, I mean, I'll be blunt, I think the MITRE evals is just a big marketing scheme. But like the reason why I say that is because like the testing is not standardized enough for me to be confident in it. And I say that one because like MITRE's great, but like I don't necessarily see them leading research much, to be honest. So like whatever their standard is for testing, one, there's no transparency behind the testing. So like I can't validate whether or not that testing was good or bad. The level of testing, so was it initial access, post-exploitation, etc. Everybody's going to have like their own default detections built within their EDR. There's two questions that come with that. One, how is the detection formatted in the sense that someone can actually reliably like proactively or reactively look at that alert and do something with it? And two, how fast does the alert come in? Is it just like, oh, we saw an alert, but the alert came 45 minutes later? That, I'm sorry, but that's useless to anybody in the SOC. Like you might as well just like toss that to IR or somebody down the road doing, you know what I mean? Like it's not going to help. And then also when it comes to one thing I would like to see in the evals as well is like testing on the format of the data. There's a lot of phenomenal EDRs out there that give, like I have my own top 3 EDRs, right? But some of those EDRs expose data more difficult or like in a way that's like super hard to query and or do correlations to where it's actually hindering defenders. And so it's like you might have the best telemetry in the world, but if it's in a bad format and I can't really do much with it, then it's effectively useless to me. And I now have to do extra legwork in order to do something with it. That's what I would like to see from the EDR evals. And then if I saw that, I probably wouldn't think it's a big marketing scheme. So that's kind of like my thought on the evals.
Yeah, I think it is a marketing scheme just because we're not evaluating the EDR capability, we're evaluating the threats against the EDR. Because no one in their sane mind would to give the EDR and you tell them it's shit. And they say, okay, show that. I will not participate next time. Because I think the best thing that MITRE can do is create segments of evaluation. Because, for example, you as an engineer in a SOC or as a detection engineer, you might be interested in the telemetry aspect. But if you're a consultant trying to implement EDR inside of a client, you know the first thing that they say is put everything to maximum. And then you say, oh, this blocked. And they say the next thing is, oh, we will put it to medium, but it's on your own risk. Like in their mindset, they built it for the maximum capacity and they know it will never work in real life. So like they test it against that and they say we block, but in real life, everyone is on the default and the default do nothing because the defaults are meant for keeping production running. And that's what 99% of people care about.
I agree with you. Like just because like there's a preventative policy you can turn on, it doesn't mean that it's actually effective and usable in your environment. Like I could go turn on smart app. I had a buddy who had like, he just got Windows 11, turn on smart app control, and the poor guy couldn't launch Rocket League for a week, 2 weeks. You know, that's not usable. I can't do nothing with that. So it's like
business critical issue.
Exactly. But my point there being is like, it's super tough, right? And when you like, you could CrowdStrike, MDE, everybody could probably turn on all their policies. It's like, great, you could log into the computer and you probably wouldn't be able to get any work done, right? But like, if there's no transparency, to your point, Nas, and Justin, like, what's the policy they're using? And also, like, during the test, are they able to switch the policy, right? Like, it's not necessarily a fair test. Like, I'd like to see, like, if MITRE's like, we didn't see this, and they're like, oh, we have something we're working on. Give me like 3 days, and they push it out, and then they see it. It's like, well, that's you know what I mean?
So I think the biggest thing is, and this is going to get a little bit into the spicy take, is the EDR designed to solely detect, or is it designed to detect and prevent? Because preventing a blocking of action is different than detection, right? So and this gets into the bypass, argument is, it's, hey, we got some technique, post-exploitation into the environment. It did A, B, and C. The EDR threw an alert, but it didn't block. Is that still a win? And how is that defined? And so I think there's been this sort of misconception of the role of EDR. What is it supposed to truly do? Because I don't know if it was actually intended, in the beginning when it came out, say to do endpoint detection response, right?
Mhm.
Detect and respond. Respond, log in, get hands on keyboard, sort of, shell and run all your PowerShell scripts, your DFIR scripts, grab some memory, dump your memory, go do DFIR, maybe contain, maybe reboot or whatever. But now you're getting into this prevention mode that we want our EDR to stop service creation. We want our EDR to, stop the execution of lolbin or lol driver, right?
Mhm.
And how do you measure that? And so that's when we look at our purple teams, we do look at detect, deflect, and deter. And we try to score on that and have it a little bit more transparent of your EDR did block X and triggered an alert, or your EDR just triggered an alert but didn't block, right, with some of your Active Directory based attacks. So it's
but one thing, I think this can never be done at an abstract level, which is where you don't care about the organization, because at the end of the day, these are implemented at organization level. And if you do any engineering level, when you try to create any telemetry based product, you'll soon figure out that there is an engineering aspect that's not completely unrelated by security. Like there is like the speed of the telemetry, trying to take into consideration some configuration on the endpoint. And there is the thing that if you write a detection, for example, the false positive ratio is unknown. Like you can figure out the built-in stuff on a false positive level, but there is this aspect that's always needed to be done by the client. And I think if we go back to the Aton times when he defined in Gartner what EDR is, I think the R was a hope. That's not a reality. I think the response aspect was a theoretical functionality that was never meant to be implemented in everything. Like, of course, you can respond or you can prevent certain things, but there are things by design out of your control. Like some clients will require SMB1 for whatever reason. Some clients will require NTLM. So some clients will have some weird things in their Active Directory. And when you try to do eval, that's why I agree with Jonny in the marketing scheme thingy, is that, yeah, participation is like beneficial to the vendor because they can show a very controlled thing, which is, yeah, we detect, but it's missing another piece, which is detect what in what context and which configuration you use, because those are the things that an actual human being will configure and will care about in real life. And maybe maybe we shouldn't care if it detects. Maybe we should care about, more importantly, what the EDR gives us, because at the end of the day, the natural evolution from antivirus to EDR was this, is that even the antivirus vendor like Symantec, McAfee, back in the day, they had thousands of engineers writing those static signatures. We found out that they can be bypassed with a little bit of effort. So we gave telemetry to people. So when we gave telemetry to people, we gave them control. And by definition, the EDR removed control. They offer you telemetry. And I would be when I did evaluation in my company for EDRs, that's the most important thing I cared about, which is what are the functionality? At what level of telemetry are you caring about? Are you lying to me when you detect mimikatz? You see, those kind of questions, I believe they would be answered better than 99%. I don't care if you block, because I use AnyDesk, so you can't block it.
No, well said. Well said.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is we have to identify what the original purpose of EDR was and what AV was, right? Even though they use very similar technologies to, achieve their goal, they are two different things. AV are more blocking operations, prevention capabilities, etc. Right? Like, get the low-hanging fruit as best as you can, right? Mimikatz drops on a host, kick that sucker out. Like, hopefully you don't let that stick around for too long. EDR's original goal was to expose telemetry of behaviors to defenders, right? In a format by which that they can do something with for detection purposes. Now, building on custom detection is like the next layer of that, which is great. I'm not a bit like, you can do response and stuff like that with EDR. Like, I just think that's like a sign, like SenseIR and MDE. Like, it's just like, I'm not really seeing people really use that. And it's like a capability. It's just like a selling thing. Like, hey, we have this thing. But I tell people all the time, like, try not to use SenseIR. But like, Microsoft also uses SenseIR to push down configs for like PowerShell scripts and things like that. So identifying what the original purpose of EDR is super important, because then we can start to build the stepping stones of what we can expect. Because I think some of the expectations in the community for what EDR is and should be doing is unrealistic based off of like its original scope, personally.
EDRC2. Will there be any breaches of involving, I came in as EDRS using EDRSC2 channels and I ran all these scripts on your host?
There was a couple this past year that did not get publicly reported. Well,
Yeah.
widely publicly reported. So the one thing I'd add about the EDR piece, so I talk to, I don't know, a lot of clients each week. I talk a lot of sales calls. Like a lot of people buy EDR products for their out-of-the-box prevention capabilities. Like, yeah, they use, they pipe everything into a SIM and they build extra detections on top of it. But like 80% of the people I talk to, like, expect them to stop things, and they expect them to stop post-exploitation behavior. Like, whether that's right or wrong or whatever it is, but if you look at the marketing for all these products, it's we stop this, we stop that. Like AV was great because you stopped, initial access payloads, but you didn't stop any post-exploitation. So most people went to EDR because you could do that next step. And like, there's this big disconnect. Like, I agree with everybody who does defense and writes detections about like what an EDR product is, but I talk to clients all the time who are like, why did this thing you did get by this? Like, I bought this for that. Like, I don't care about writing another detection for it. That's great. It should have stopped it, and then goes and yells at the vendor. Like, and they get themselves into that whole thing because of this evals. We stop 110% of attacks. Our marketing says we stop, and then the client buys it. Like, yes, you use it for response, you use it for writing extra detections, but like, that's not how these things are positioned to people who buy this stuff at a executive level.
Yeah, well, and I agree with that. I think like, you also have to think about like what the size of the company is, and do they actually have the capability to build detections on top of like the telemetry that's exposed to them, right? Like, that's a big question. But like, it's also unrealistic for an organization to go to Microsoft and say like, yo, why did this red team or this malware run PS exec inside the, it's like, well, PS exec is signed by Microsoft and can do a whole bunch of other things. Like, I've seen a lot of malware this past year get like spread through PS exec, you know what I mean? And so it's like, how do you expect Microsoft to create a detection or prevent that, especially when it's signed by them, right? It's like one of those big questions. Like, you can't expect any vendor to block everything, because one, that comes with R&D. You have to be able to like understand all these post-exploitation techniques. You also have to be able to predict all the different variational capabilities. And then you have to assume you can get telemetry. And then you have to assume that you can cut them off during execution. So it's like, there's a lot of moving pieces there that is there. So that's why I'm always like on the side of try to be reasonable in what you expect from an EDR. Yeah, they should be preventing some things for sure, but it's not going to be everything.
Yeah, but I think that's to the questions being asked, which is how many vendors will win. I think we should shift, because I believe MITRE educated people on this idea of caring about TTPs a little bit, because right now coverage, I do 100% inside of companies, and people in the SOC are giving this task of assuring coverage of this technique and this tactic. I think they can use this eval thingy to shift the mindset. Instead of talking only about prevention, of course it's important, but also educating people about the benefit of an EDR. Because if you buy the top tier EDR, it's not as effective as, or it's not effective enough as the lowest end, because if you don't use it, they're similar, pretty similar at the basic level. Like, what makes MDE, and CrowdStrike is the level of granularity. Like, if you test, I don't know, Symantec or McAfee EDR, they are okay, but if you don't configure them, they're practically, as Justin proved on Twitter, if you dump if you dump, I don't know, like WMI exec, or if you dump Mimikatz, they will block it. So on the surface, that's why everyone is getting the 100%, because the thing that we're evaluating is a lie. Okay.
Yeah, I think part of it also is understanding that if I had a perfect environment that only ran Windows and only ran Office and only ran, let's say, Exchange or a SQL server, and I deployed out EDR-based policy, 1,000% you could deploy all day, no issues whatsoever. The problem is all of these third-party applications that are running, anything else that gets deployed, because no organization is just running Windows out the box as is, fully updated, all the bells and whistles, right? Like there's so much configuration, and no vendor can fully account for that. There's products and things that exist, especially you think about an organization that has a footprint in, let's say, 10 different countries. Let's point to China as a great example, where if you've ever worked in an organization that has Chinese applications running, it's all malware. But you can't be like, oh yeah, just let me start blocking all the stuff. Like, oh no, that's our legitimate tax software that we need to use every single day. Like, well, I can't not prevent you from doing that. And so I think it's another thing that people don't realize is that, yes, we do need to push the bounds on the prevention side and the detection side, but we also need to realize that more data doesn't equal better detection capability or that it's going to solve a problem. We think, hey, I have a SIM. I'm going to throw all my data in there and then go talk to any org with a SIM. And I guarantee you they are not using 100% of the data to its full capability. It's just, it's impossible, right? And so that's where you get to the things of like building, from the vendor side, the detections on top of that data, and then building your own detections because of those gaps, and you're trying to solve it. But the data is never fully operational. It's never fully scaled out. And so I think it's just one of those things that we just need to be cognizant of, and then also push on the people within organizations that there's things we can do that do not require us buying a tool. That's configuring GPOs, that's tuning things, right? That's making sure that we're doing proper segmentation within networking and architecture and those things. Like that's also a push that I think organizations should really do this year in order to help really save money, because there's a lot of things you can do that don't cost you money except for time, and then investing the time and resources to doing those things and making sure they're done right. So I think it's kind of like a big push on that front.
I'm excited for this next piece because I'm always in the rat race of the POC and how do you test and getting the POC, but also the variations to test. Jonny has really done well to bring me the light to see a lot of different variations of having variation testing. And so the problem is, so you see X technique or red team doing X technique and saying, okay, how do I replicate that? Okay, I can't just go buy Cobalt Strike. That's against the EULA. I can't just go buy, Brute Retile or Nighthawk or fancy, but is there a way for me to replicate X technique? And if so, am I doing that on some other OST that's out there? Or do I have to go codify it myself? And then with that, then I'm running into this steep learning curve, but also I'm in the race against, yes, other researchers, but I'm looking in the race of the adversary as well. So and then I can't just go get the EULA of CrowdStrike, hey, CrowdStrike, we're watching this, send me a license or EDR, I'm happy to have, but you're in that of how can I then test OST against that EDR? So I'm in this kind of, middle box of testing of tools and variations, but and I understand there's secret sauce and intellectual property and it's costing, I get all that and respect that. But then there's also testing of and using the EDR as well. So I'm in this kind of, so this is a great segue is the OSTs and how do you guys tackle all that?
Listen, here's one quick thing I want to say. If red teams and offensive researchers want to use or buy an EDR to test their TTPs against, then anybody in purple team or blue should be able to buy any C2 they want to test against. It's just kind of one quick thing.
Let's roll it up.
I would agree with that one.
Can't have your cake and eat it. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things.
I agree 100%. I agree.
Yeah, because it's the hard part for any vendor in any MDR, MSSP, right? Because most of them are relying on what they see. And so when someone rolls in with Nighthawk, they've never seen it before. They've never tested with it before. They have no clue what it looks like other than the cool blogs and what that team does, that they share publicly. And so when a vendor sees this blow through, this is the first time they've ever come across it because they cannot purchase it to test themselves with it or to see it themselves.
I get, here's the thing is this is one of my most if whenever I see this on Twitter, I just have to sit back with popcorn and eat, because like I'm just like, geez. Here's the thing: is like, personally, this is what I think. Okay, I think defensive wise, we should be focusing on behaviors. But yes, you should get the low hanging fruit where you can. I don't think you should go grab the newest version of Cobalt Strike, signature it, and think that you're good to go, right? Nighthawk, whatever it is. I don't think that's the route to go for detection. However, what are red teams and offensive people doing when they get an EDR? They're trying to get around some of those prevention or detection capabilities. So on the inverse of that, why can't blue teams do the same thing? Right? Like that's just kind of like what my thought when it comes to that. Obviously you don't want to get stuck there. I think a lot of people in defense get stuck there. We should expand and be more advanced in our defensive capability, because then at that point, like C2s only do like really one thing, and that is get code execution from one point to another to perform some action, right? So maybe I want to go like detect, service creation, schedule tasks, WMI exec, all these different lateral movement capabilities, etc. Like those are super important. But low hanging fruit. Shoot, if I see mimikatz.exe drop, like sound the alarm, boys. Let's get it out. You know what I mean? I think like that's okay to do, but like we don't want to get stuck there. But when it comes to, I just think there's a lot of I want to be able to do this, but I don't want the other side to be able to do this. And it's
well, I guess, and I can't say off the record because it's actually on the record, but is people don't want to be embarrassed, right? And so it's like, hey, I have CrowdStrike and aggressive policy, here, and all the memory protections and ASLR, configured like crazy, and then it gets quote unquote bypassed, and you don't have any prevent mode, and someone goes and posts that on Twitter. And so that's why they don't want the opening up of the floodgates of the researchers to have these sort of tools. And likewise, same with the other way, right? With the red team having some tools saying, look, it's revealing a little bit of the sauce of this is how it operates under the hood. Case in point, as you saw, I think way while back with the Cobalt Strike default name pipes. And then you had to have Mudge, come out and say, it was the whole intent was to bring your own weaponization, right? It was never intended to just run out of the box. The whole intent was bring your own weaponization and customization, and have that learning curve. But then it's, saying that doesn't, this tool or technique doesn't get stopped by, does get stopped by CrowdStrike or, SentinelOne, Microsoft as well. And so then I go post that on Twitter, and then, dev team of C2 is embarrassed. So it's a tough paradigm to be in, but it is a real one to try to discuss and kind of break down and say, hey, what's the middle ground as we're all trying to move all programs forward. And going back to Jonny's side, we're working at, are we working at the behest of the SOC? Is our client really a SOC of who are we really to operate of? The goal of red teaming or the goal of purple teaming is who are we looking to enhance the most and get the most win out of? Is that really, we should only be working to serve the SOC. And that goes back to the whole beginning argument, right? At the very beginning of this whole conversation.
I think to that point, depending on what level of telemetry you have available to you, the actual C2 payload may be of little use for, like if you have like Sysmon, for example, you can give me a sample of Nighthawk today and it won't make a difference, right? There's nothing in Sysmon telemetry that would tell you like, hey, a Nighthawk agent is running on your system. That thing doesn't exist. Like maybe if you're an EDR vendor and you have access to some like really low level telemetry, then you can maybe do something with that. But for the most part, I think people forget the word framework in C2 framework, right? Like these aren't things that you just like, I think Justin mentioned this on Twitter a couple of weeks ago too. You can't just like bake a raw default Cobalt Strike exe, shove it on a box and expect it to run. That won't happen. I can tell you from experience, having tried that on a purple team, it doesn't work. So I think like people become obsessed with this, like access to these like samples and things like that. And if you're writing, like Yarrow rules and things like that, it makes total sense. But if you're working with like endpoint telemetry specifically, there's a lot of other telemetry available that's way more valuable detection wise. Think of your like identity provider, like Office 365, things like that that'll get you like way more bang for your buck, rather than like running a beacon payload or a Nighthawk payload on your box, you know, over and over again, and you'll get no telemetry. I could tell you that 100%.
I feel like there's a weird obsession with going, that thing is Cobalt Strike, or that thing is Brute Repel, or whatever. But in reality, you don't care about what that thing is, right? Think about from like a defender's perspective. That thing's malicious, is doing bad things. That's what you ultimately care about. Now, after the fact, you come back from an intelligence standpoint and then focus on that, or right, because to the point, it's a framework. So each time you see that Cobalt Strike beacon, that thing could completely be different. The things that it was doing are completely different. So it doesn't matter at the point at time that, oh, that's Cobalt Strike. I don't really care it's Cobalt Strike. I don't care whatever C2 it is. I care what things it was doing and what it did do so that I can go and respond to that. And so I don't understand like this thing of like, hey, you got this alert. Like, oh, is that Cobalt Strike? Like, okay, if I tell you it's Cobalt Strike, even if it's not, what are you going to do about it? Like, your response doesn't change because it's Cobalt Strike versus some other thing. If I told you, oh, it's Mythic, you'd be like, oh, it's Mythic? Pff, all right, I'm out. Like, we're good. Just close up shop. We're going home for the day. Like, no, you still respond the exact same way. But there's this weird fascination with going, Cobalt Strike, Cobalt Strikes are up, Cobalt Strikes are down, Brute Repel's up, right? Like, who cares? Like, it's respond and that's it.
I think the idea there was to have a little bit more intelligence. You know, attribution matters. You know, to borrow from Andrew. You know,
impose cost on it, right?
I'll definitely give him a shout out. I'm definitely going to get a attribution matters shirt after this. Is actor is running Cobalt Strike or Mythic is then how do we tie that back to set actor that's in my environment targeting this horizontal vertical, their known target, this horizontal vertical in industry? What other TTPs may they have run? So then we can go for hunt the adversary, evict the adversary. And so now we're getting into a little bit more of, you know, other context, and context is key in providing, saying, you've given me this alert. What do you want IR person to do with it? Right? So it's Cobalt Strike. What do you want them to do with it? Do you want them to, yes, contain, eradicate, recover, but also what should they do to go hunting of lateral movement, credential dumping, token, like other steps within the chain?
I think the fascination with identifying what C2 framework it is because I think the vast majority of defensive people in our industry are programmed to be signature based due to false positive ratios. Right. I think Nas, I saw you get interested when I said that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think that's a big thing, right? Is like, you know, to Andrew's point, you know, context is key. And if we want to move into that behavioral route, there's a lot of people saying that they do behavioral based detections, but they tune a detection so much that it inadvertently becomes a signature based detection, although it's marked as a behavioral based detection. And that's because we are programmed for high fidelity detections at all times without much wiggle room. And I think that's where, you know, as a defensive community, we need to expand into more advanced kind of technology stacks in the sense of detection and triage, context grabbing, etc., so that we can do more behavioral based things, because it's a harder problem to solve. But I think, to your point, Paul, like that's why I think there's a fascination with identifying, was this Cobalt Strike? And I think it's because we are vastly programmed to be more signature based than anything right now.
I've seen products label stuff Cobalt Strike too that were not anywhere near Cobalt Strike, and just by default the analysts just like, okay, if one was Cobalt Strike, then the next one's going to be Cobalt Strike 2, and then you're dropping payloads that have nothing to do with Cobalt Strike whatsoever, and you're just getting slacks or whatever, like, hey man, you're dropping Cobalt Strike. And yeah, so definitely agree with that dynamic, that mental like rote learning of like Cobalt Strike really like blinds your vision. Sorry,
no worries. But I'll just add that this mentality of caring about attribution is really important from an analyst point of view, because you're thinking right now from a SOC perspective. Most people do not have that. The reason why antivirus really focused on SIGing, because it gives you context immediately. When you know it's Cobalt Strike, you know it's important. When I give you a behavioral thing saying, hey, this is communicating via an uncommon port, what's the next step? You need many more information, a lot more information to put the context into perspective. Because when you put C2 communication on uncommon ports using a suspicious named piped, whatever, those are behavioral things that also overlaps with legitimate things. And if you screw up your detection really well, now you'll have a really high false positive ratio that will trigger the analyst. If you remember antivirus times, machine learning detections, when they started to go out, what happened is you get an ML.752 whatever. Then what? Then nothing happens because you cannot investigate it. And what happens is you ignore it. And if you do that enough times, like people forget that inside of vendors, if you go to Microsoft, they have people writing signatures for every product. They have. You can't. It's a necessity, because this caring about Cobalt Strike, it's really important, because if you don't have those types of SIGs, you need an investigation team. And this is what is lacking, because if you cannot prevent at the default, for example, the fact that you double click Cobalt Strike and it gets blocked, it's because it's SIGed, and it's SIGed with different levels. Like you can SIG it with opcodes, you can SIG it with strings. There are some stuff you can use to SIG it. But if you SIG it right, it will be difficult to change. Like some people, like you, a basic example in process creation, which is original file name versus the image name. Most people find it difficult to change. Most people, I mean, script kiddies, like they don't change the original file names, but they will change the image. And yeah, it's a useless distinction, but it's important because you get rid of those script kiddies that do not change the original file name. And back again to the idea of signature based, I agree with Jonny, is that, yeah, the mentality needs to shift. But as Justin proved when he talks to the salespeople, is that their mentality is so far behind, like it's unsavable at this point. If you want to be pessimistic, it's savable. Okay, we're not losing jobs, guys. But yeah, the idea is like, it's very difficult to shift that mindset, because it's an important mindset, because we lack the information. A basic example is you see something that Windows does when you're tuning false positive for your own detection in a lab. How many minutes or hours do you spend to determine if that's okay to tune out or not okay? Sometimes you'll do it in your own detection. I don't care. Like I give you a simple example. I was writing a detection for the binary that installs shim database, and it has some flags that uses that are undocumented. And if you Google everything on the internet, it doesn't tell you anything. So I spend the time to understand that, but just imagine I gave that detection with that, like, how do you say, assumptions, and an analyst finds it. Now you're in a situation where, okay, I need to have more context. And if I don't have it, I hate your detection, I'll disable it. I'll do that X, Y, Z.
I agree with you, Naz. I think in order for us to shift the mindset, there needs to be an uptick in defensive training, right? Like analysts, defensive engineers, et cetera, they need to be. When I first came into the industry, I was told once by somebody that the barrier to entry to get into red teaming and pen testing is higher than blue team, because pen testing and red teaming people typically are more technical, right? I think that should almost be flipped, right? And because the reason why I say that, like the reason why we're so hung up on signature-based stuff is because someone very junior who just gets into the info set, they can understand that pretty quick, right? Like, and they can latch on to that. But to expand that capability, to expand that knowledge takes a lot of training. And who's really doing that training today, right? Who's showcasing, hey, like, look at, like, when you get this telemetry, like every piece of metadata that's exposed through an event has got something to do with that technique in some way, shape, or form, because the technique is based off the technology. And so whoever exposed or created that event thought that metadata would be important for somebody. Understanding each piece of metadata. Mm-hmm. Roberto Rodriguez and his brother did a phenomenal job at this when they created OSIM, because they went through and they documented metadata. And when going through that, they had to understand the metadata and doing the standardization. I kind of think of, those brothers as being like the first people in industry to really take a step forward and saying, hey guys, from a defensive community, we have to understand data first. And in order for us to expand, to your point, Naz, we have to understand the data. That takes a more advanced mindset, because we have to understand the technology. So that, I think in order for us to do that, we have to start at that spot first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Totally. By the way, I rename all my payloads to hag.exe. So my meme cats is actually hag.exe.
Hag cats.
Yes, that's right. Hag cats. Not hack cats, hack dogs. Yeah.
Hack kittens. Oh yeah, it's good, guys. Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool perspectives. We're gonna move a little bit here to the next slide, which is some pre-questions we had that we had gotten, and I'm gonna call individuals out for each one of these questions, and it's gonna be kind of random. Maybe I'll just go down the list. So we'll start with Aton. Does running Who Am I make you an APT?
I don't know. I think if that particular APT did the required enumeration and found that running Who Am I is safe and then ran Who Am I, then yep, I think that's pretty advanced.
Cool.
That's my answer there.
Perfect. Great hot take. All right, next we're gonna go right to Jonny. Are out of the box EDR detections enough? And that's a loaded question, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
I will say man, the consulting's coming at me. It depends. It depends on the size of your organization. If you're the mom and pop shop, probably, right? If you are a more enterprise-based customer, then absolutely not, right? You need to expand what those out-of-box detections are. The problem with those is we don't actually know how they're built or what they're built upon the majority of the time, right? So I don't typically trust things that I can't see how they're built. And so if something's popping off, like saying, hey, this is I don't know, some lateral movement capability, it's like, how is that detected? So that's why I think most cases definitely not for the out-of-box detections.
Yeah.
Sorry, Justin, we're out of the OST talk. Sorry.
I saw you were still going. I had an emergency pop up, so I'm back.
Good.
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
Perfect.
The next question is just for you. Is EDR evasion the right term when telemetry is still available?
So this goes back to my previous point about why people buy these products, right? So wherever you're sitting, I agree that if it's in telemetry, right, like that's still valid. But if you buy the product for its blocking capabilities, and I've gotten around it, then whatever word you want, then you can use. But I mean, everybody tends to use evasion, so that's the feedback we get from clients, right? If I drop a macro document, it executes successfully. I run a payload, and they get mad that I have now evaded their defensive product that they paid a lot of money to stop 110% of threats with. Then, so but I do agree. If you're sitting on the defensive engineering side, there's telemetry somewhere, but that's kind of like the tree falling in the woods and nobody looks at it kind of thing. So.
Side note, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but Justin, are you drinking a Mountain Dew Voltage, or is that like a weird colored water bottle? Okay. From my point of view, I thought it was a Mountain Dew Voltage, and it gave me like flashbacks to my childhood when I was eating pizza playing Halo nonstop.
I wish, but no, it's just water.
Okay. Sorry, continue with the important stuff.
No, we're good.
You're good.
Did I missed the OST slide, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, we can. Yeah.
Nah.
Well, we'll do another one. We have actually we have some plans that we'll do another OST, and you'll be on it. We'll make sure we start.
One question left, and then we can actually talk about our future plans.
Yes. All right. Okay. Why are anomaly-based detections difficult to perform without false positives when dealing with very large environments? And I think.
Have I one word answer?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'll say this: developers. There you go.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Tax software.
Yeah, I was gonna say because software, but it's equivalent.
Third-party software, plain and simple. That's really what it comes down to, which we touched on, which is if it was just a plain Windows box, your FP rate is probably non-existent or very limited to where you could probably ship it into prod and still be fine. But the minute anything is involved with third-party software installed on an OS, it's game over. Yeah,
and to get back to Johnny's point is that we need to link this behavioral thing with much more context, because like the idea of you building a behavior is that you misunderstand that OSTs or malware is no different than the OS itself, because they are not like using a specific API created for malware. They are using exactly the same thing as the OS does. And if you do it really carefully, you'll mimic certain stuff. Like a best example is shimming in Windows. It uses application hooking. Like it uses like direct hooking. Even though if you go back to Microsoft one day in one blog, they said, no. When you build defensive product, you shouldn't use like DLL injection. Use this, use a driver and use like a callback. It's far better. But they do it for compatibility reasons, right? And it makes sense. And Microsoft does it. Some Italian company or some Polish company can do that as well. And yeah, and you cannot make the distinction without context. So that's why.
We gave you a shout out, Naz, for your recent research blog markdown that you posted. So
yeah, I switched to Markdown because it's easy.
Nice. All right. Paul, you want to hit the next one? I think this is a new section we're starting for 2024.
Yeah. We'll have to circle back for next time, but we'll start with this one for next time, which is circumvent or circumvented. As a thesaurus lookup, hot twist bypass will also show up as if you pull out your thesaurus and look up circumvent or bypass. They're all tangentially related. But I think we'll go into, because we're running out of time. Oh wait, there we go. It's coming back. We did this last year, and we had a blast with Purple Madness. So we're looking forward to redoing it this year, and hopefully bringing on some familiar faces, as well as some old faces, to kick off something different with Purple Madness coming up in March-ish at some point, middle of March, end of March. So it'll be a good time. But I think what we'll also be tying in is, Mike, you want to do the next slide? Because I think you create all
buddy,
these
we didn't. We didn't add that slide.
Oh. Well, as part of Purple Madness, or shortly tied into it, we'll be doing a C2 showdown where we'll be looking for 2 volunteers to help us take a C2 out of the box and get it running against a plain Jane install of Windows Defender. So if you're interested in participating in that,
I vote LZ. I vote LZ.
As well as an actual, March Madness C2 showdown. Oh, there it is. So we'll have both in tandem along with our Purple Madness. So very excited for these coming up in a few months. So yeah, look out.
That image needs to be corrected with LZ's beard. So can you please have AI fix the image a little bit and make it more hacking LZ, please?
Yes.
Get back to Dolly. Tell it to
more APT. Hey, thank you all. Thank you all for joining. I know we went over a lot. There was a lot of content, obviously, to cover. But thank you for joining in and dropping knowledge on us.
Coming.
No, thanks for having us. It was a great way to spend a Friday.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. Hopefully I can be on again.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
For sure.
Thanks, y'all. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Cheers.
See you soon.
Sure.